This is Portia, the candy-spewing spider. This is how we built her.
Have you not tested it?
For Halloween, we built a giant candy-spewing spider. All you had to do was walk up, press the giant red button for a chance of getting some candy. But I should start this story from the beginning, which was about a year ago in September, right before Halloween, when we were thinking, what could we build for Halloween? And all the thoughts were around something like a candy catapult. But then we had the idea of building a giant candy-spewing spider, which is way better. It's scary because it's a spider, and two, it shoots candy, or at least spews candy, at trick-or-treaters, which is great. So obviously the first thing to do here is to figure out what does a spider look like, because if you're going to build a giant spider, you should build it anatomically correct. After some research, we learned about the parts of the spider: an abdomen, a cephalothorax, which maybe we should call a head, and 8 legs, all attached to the head? It's interesting how all the legs were attached to the head, and this did lead to some balance problems for us. We probably didn't have to build it quite as anatomically correct as we did. Now, Portia is modeled after a specific type of spider, a Portia jumping spider, which is a genus that contains 21 different species. I think they look about the same. Okay, so back to some engineering. The abdomen will sit on a table, and the cephalothorax or head will hang off the edge, and there'll be a central tube that holds the candy, and a release mechanism. The idea is this will be gravity fed, but more on that later. And that was Portia in 2021. She totally worked. We even got this really cool recording on Halloween night of her eyes glowing red. Unfortunately, she didn't deliver candy more than a handful of times on Halloween night. The servo burned out twice, and after those repairs, things just started to fall apart in the candy delivery department. For 2022, we needed something much better. First, we needed better legs. It's hard to tell from many of the 2021 photos, but the legs are not holding themselves up. They're just leaning on the fence and on each other. While we didn't want Portia to be able to hold herself up, although that would have been cool, we had the shelf for that. We did want the legs to spread out and to be positionable like a real spider. The original leg joints were made from PVC pipe insulation glued around some stiff wire, which we then pushed into the ends of some PVC pipe to make the legs. And as you can see from this silly video of me trying to move one leg around, they didn't work exactly the way we had hoped. There was no reason not to keep the PVC leg parts, but we would need a much stiffer joint, so after some research and a little testing, we settled on these 3D printed joints that kind of ratchet or lock together. They've got these triangle ridges on them, so they can go together like this, and just stick a bolt through like that. And now, when you put pressure on them, you see they climb the little ridges like that. So the idea is that this will tighten it down, and that'll hold it together, and we'll stick these into the PVC, and now we'll go test it and see if it's strong enough. Here we can see my very sophisticated testing environment where I try to break this joint. And there it goes. Let's see that again in slow motion. After a little investigation, I created a few more versions to test.
Earlier we tried out the original one here and we
Yeah,
saw
yeah. Let's go see how they break.
So it turns out that the 45-degree one actually did the best between these two. You can see kind of broke across the middle here. The 90-degree one, which I thought was going to do the best, actually like split in half completely here. So I think that answers the question, where the 45-degree one, the teeth don't look as good, but it was easiest to clean up between these two, and it held up the best. So I guess we're going to try out 45 degrees and see how that works.
Each leg has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments, which means 4 joints, times 8 legs, which means I need at least 32 joints, which is 64 halves, because each joint is made of 2 of the same part. So, here's a build montage of cleaning and putting all of these together. Some of the cleaning of the prints was harder than some of the others, and it took a while for us to realize that it was the orientation of the print that made it easier. Oh well. Those are some pretty good legs. And now for phase 2, better candy delivery. The first generation of Portia used a mechanism like this to basically put doors in front of the tube, and then the candy would fall against that door, and we'll be able to snap open real quick, snap closed again to let some candy through. And that this little servo motor on the bottom here that would turn this arm and make those doors open and close. And this worked pretty well, but I burned out servo motors, and the whole thing got a little bit rickety by the end. Also, even though it would close completely when it's actually mounted on the spider, it would close all the way. You'd get little bits of candy that would sometimes sneak through. There'd be a lot of pressure on these doors trying to push them open, or little bits of candy would get snagged in the middle when they tried to close, and then the servo would sit there trying to push on the candy, but it didn't have enough leverage to actually close it. So then I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could do something like a spiral? So now in theory, I have my spiral, toss some candy in, and we'll see if any of it comes out the other side here. So that seemed to work pretty well. As I tested this more and more, what I discovered is that candy would get wedged inside here get wedged right on the edge of this, so the piece of wrapper would get sucked over the edge, and then it would just get stuck. It would kind of wedge itself in there, and the whole spiral would get stuck. So at this point, it was getting pretty close to Halloween, and we were running out of time. So I went back to the drawing board to look for a simpler solution that didn't involve moving parts and trying to move candy through a spiral that's very similar to its size. I think if the spiral were much larger compared to the candy, I think it would work fine. But because the spiral is so close to the candy's size, even when it's wider like this, it really started to cause a problem. With a working candy dispenser, it was time for the last phase. Integration. Hell. We already put Portia outside because we wanted people walking through the neighborhood to see her before Halloween. So there was a lot of standing at awkward angles, losing nuts inside of Portia. One of them just went shooting across the inside of the spider head. Always buy extra nuts. And sitting outside, working on my computer. I'm so lucky, I just found the nut. At one point, I was even holding Portia's head, or cephalothorax, with my head. Fortunately, it wasn't raining. Yet. But by this point, things are more or less starting to come together. This turned out to be a pretty big integrated project, and I couldn't have done it without help from my friends. So I'd like to thank Agnes for spending really long video calls with me talking about things and brainstorming ways to try to get the spiral to work. And of course, Cantor and Fair and Danny for playing my spider games. But mostly I'd like to thank B for really helping with everything along the way, from expanding foam to shaping and painting to brainstorming and staying up late trying to test new things. Portia wouldn't exist without her today. And now, let's see how she did on Halloween. Okay, so it's a very, very rainy Portland Halloween. You can see, well, I'm wearing rain gear, but I don't know if you can actually tell that it's raining. And Portia didn't work earlier. So we're gonna see if she's gonna cooperate now that it's getting closer to trick-or-treat time. So here we go. It turned out that everything was wet. Very wet. But after some paper towels and lots of tape to hold wires out of the rain, I got her working again. We did get a few visitors in the rain, and Portia did admirably, delivering bags of candy to very wet trick-or-treaters. Unfortunately, I didn't think to actually video any of that. So here's this wonderful video of B testing the spider right before it started absolutely pouring on Halloween night. And yes, I did test it.
Oh!
Oh.
Have you not tested it? Oops.
There was some high wind this morning apparently, and a lot of legs have been completely sheared off. It's a lot of damage to repair.